when I signed with Megaforce Records, they were mostly a metal label and a hard rock label, but they were looking to expand and diversify, and they were into the idea of having something that wasn't necessarily that, although there's, obviously a rock edge to this record.
So Warren, welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. How you doing today?
Good.
So, hey, Warren, you've been part of so many legendary chapters, but today's focus is about Tales of Ordinary Madness. So before we dig in, what does this album represent to you now, 30-something years later, and kind of what is the purpose and the scope of the re-release?
Well, they say you only make your first album once, so there's a lot of pressure that goes into choosing the songs and choosing the producer and the musicians that are going to appear on it and what direction you're going to take the music. Because for someone like myself who writes songs in a lot of different directions, it was it was a challenge to make that decision. What am I going to come out of the chute with? What's going to represent me as a new artist. When I signed with Megaforce Records, they were mostly a metal label and a hard rock label, but they were looking to expand and diversify, and they were into the idea of having something that wasn't necessarily that, although there's, obviously a rock edge to this record, but they were great about letting me do what I wanted to do, but very encouraging in giving their opinions about which songs they love the most. But it was a fun experience. I was very happy with the record, but I always felt like, especially if a few years later when I would hear it back, it kind of had a timestamp on it, because from a mix standpoint, it was mixed in a way that sounded like records sounded at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. That changed a few years later, and records started sounding more organic again. And I always thought it would be great to remix this record with a more organic approach. So I ran into Misty Colasso, who owns Megaforce Records now. I ran into her at the Beacon Theater at a benefit, and I brought up the fact that I'd always thought about remixing it, and she smiled and said, "I've always thought that too, let's do it." And so we just decided to do this.
Warren, obviously you love metal, or you like it because you do some Sabbath stuff. I've seen you do AC/DC at the Beacon. I've seen you do Aerosmith. So did you have any reservations about jumping on with John and Marsha on a metal label with Megaforce?
In the beginning, I had some reservations about it, but they were the most passionate about the music, and also there was just a vibe with them that they were hands-on. They like to get involved and make things happen, and they had a point to prove. It just kind of seemed like the right thing to do. In hindsight, was it the right decision? I'm not sure, but at that moment in time, it felt like the right decision, and I really liked them a lot and appreciated the passion that they had for my music and the flexibility that they gave me.
And the lyrics that this whole album still stands true today. If you listen to the lyrics, I was listening to it all day yesterday and today. You touched on a lot of subjects that are still important today.
It's funny how some things never change. When I listened to it recently, having not heard it in a really long time, and realized, a lot of what was going on then is going on now, and it's equally frustrating. And I feel the same way that I felt 30 years ago, that Americans have to get more involved in our everyday lives and politics, because we're trusting people to make things better, I'm not sure that that's something we can do.
Sure. Hey, Warren, when you kind of revisited, let's say, the original tapes and for the most part, the songs themselves, what jumped at you both musically and emotionally? Like when you listen to the lyrics and the song titles, were these drawn from like specific moments in your life, or was this just more like observational storytelling when you wrote the lyrics?
A little of both, some of the more personal ones, like "I'll Be the One" and "Angel City," those are coming from more personal experiences. "Fire in the Kitchen" was written shortly after I moved to New York City, and was looking out of the window of my apartment at people protesting coming up the street, and that was the inspiration behind that. Some of the songs were written when I still lived in Nashville before I moved to New York. So songs like "Movers and Shakers," when it talks about in this little big town, it's talking about Nashville and not New York. But some of them are just looking from a lens and looking at the world around and the way it affects all of us. Every song's different. As my friend Greg Allman used to say, there's as many ways to write a song as there are songs, because they all come about differently. They all wind up differently. And when I listen to those songs now, I still feel good about what I was saying. But it was a time in my life when I was writing in a certain direction, and I've had so many times since then where my writing goes in a different direction, then another direction, then another direction. So it was interesting to go back and kind of remember what that was,
Sure. The song "Tear Me Down," right? This is, let's say it's newly included in the re-release. I was listening to it today, and it's kind of funky and melodic. It's very accessible, but maybe why did that make the cut to begin with? And how do you feel like that song sits now with the rest of the album?
Well, I love the way it fits into the overall picture now. I was pushing for it to be on the record then, but we went over budget, we ran out of time, and it wasn't completed. So we kind of had to give it the axe based on financial decisions. We were at the end of the project, and literally where Chuck had a plane ticket to leave, I had a plane ticket to leave. We weren't finished with the recording overdubbing process, and it was like, well, we hate to see it go, but we'll just have to finish Tear Me Down at a later date. So I hadn't heard all those tracks until I went back in to prepare it for the mix, for this remix. And it was so great to hear everything that was on tape for that song. And it didn't take much to bring it back home. You may know that Gov't Mule wound up recording that a few years later on the deep end sessions with Bootsy Collins playing bass. So I've always loved that song, and I'm glad, because this version is really cool. I'm glad it made its way on to the new record.
Yeah. Warren, what about Chuck Leavell's all over this album? I mean, obviously he brings a lot of history from the Allmans and that kind of thing, but when you look back at that, like the writing and the recording, because he had a lot of players on this album, I mean, what did he bring to the table that you felt like maybe elevated these songs just a little bit more?
Well, Chuck and I didn't really know each other prior to making this record. We maybe had met briefly, but we both obviously had history with the Allman Brothers. I was a big fan of his work, always have been, and he's a really sweet human being. When it came about that he might be interested in producing, I thought it was a great idea because I really respect him as a musician, and we have a lot of common ground. So, he had a lot to do with shaping and molding this record. more importantly, was just a really great vibe in the studio, fun to work with. It just brings a lot of experience to the table. And he played some magnificent stuff, as did everyone. I had three of my favorite keyboard players, sometimes all on one track, like on the song Power and the Glory. Johnny Neal is playing organ, Chuck's playing Wurlitzer, and Bernie Warhill's playing clavinet. And that's keyboard heaven.
Now, did you get any?
Go ahead, Kenny.
I'm sorry. Did you have any problems like with Greg or Dickie Betts with doing a solo album? You're just new to the band, and you're in there for like 3 years, and you want to drop a solo album. Did they back you? Did they help you with it, or did they?
There was no weirdness about it. I definitely got support in that department because when I joined Dickie's band in 1986 or 7, I was already starting to prepare for making a solo record at that time. And some of these songs even go back that far. And so when Dickie called me about joining his band, he mentioned that he wanted to make a record that he had just signed to Epic Records and wanted he and I to write some songs together and put a band together to make this record. And I told him that I was very interested and honored, but that I was also preparing for a solo record at that time and there might be a conflict. And so we kind of worked through it. And I wound up putting my record on the back burner for a few years because the Allman Brothers thing took precedent.
But Warren, do you look at this album as sort of like the creative bridge that eventually led you to Gov't Mule? Like, and maybe a different way to say it was Gov't Mule already in your like plans? Like, did you have the seed planted here? Like, was this just a natural progression here?
It was more of a natural progression. The Gov't Mule had not entered our minds yet at this point. When I joined the Allman Brothers in 1989, Alan Woody joined at the same time. And although we had met before, we didn't really know each other. We became instant friends and we shared a bus. Myself and Woody and Greg Allman, the three of us rode the same bus. And so we were hanging out together all the time. And Woody and I became really close. And after I made Tales of Ordinary Madness, I was kind of contemplating what to do next in that department because, the Allman Brothers worked 6 months out of the year. We had the other 6 months to do whatever we wanted to do. And he and I started talking about, why don't we do a side project together? And at that time, that made more sense to me than me making another solo record. However, we weren't thinking, that this was going to be a bona fide band and that we were going to stay together and make a second record and a fifth record and a 10th record and all that stuff. We were just doing something in the moment for the fun of it. We didn't know what was going to happen, but it turned into something else,
Sure.
Now, Warren, do you write differently for Gov't Mule than you do, like, let's say, a solo project? Or let's say if you were going into the Allmans, do you write totally different for all three of those? Or?
Well, that's an interesting question. Dickie Betts and I talked about this quite a few times, that it's always good if there's a project on the horizon that you can write for. So if we were writing for an Allman Brothers record, then we were always thinking about the different strengths of that band, Greg's voice and the two guitars and the two drums and the direction that the Allman Brothers had forged. That would always be in the back of your mind when you were writing. So when I'm writing for a Gov't Mule record, it's the same thing. I have this thought in my head of what that music should sound like, although it can expand and always does. But a lot of the writing that I do, if there's no project on the horizon, then I'm just writing for the sake of the song. And I decide later on if it fits into what whether it's Allman Brothers or Gov't Mule or a solo record or whatever. I just kind of finish the song and figure it out later.
Sorry. Hey, Warren, how do you plan on promoting this? Obviously, the album's going to drop, but you got the Winter of Warren solo dates, and then you have the Warren Haynes Band. Like, are you going to promote this album through some of those shows?
Yeah, I mean, the Warren Haynes Band will be playing a lot of songs from this record, and even in my solo shows, there are several of these tunes that I can do by myself. So these songs are going to be getting more play the next year or so than they've gotten in a long time. And you know, talking about it in the press and online and stuff, it's really important to me that people have access to this remixed version. Some people that have heard it before, but some people have never heard it, and so it'll be their first time.
You like new for them. Speaking of new, you have a new single out, Desiree. You did for the Landman soundtrack. How was that working with a TV? Did you ever do soundtracks before?
I've had a couple here and there, but I'm friends with Billy Bob Thornton, and we've written a couple of songs together in the past. And he, some people remember he did a guest vocal kind of narration on this song called "The River Only Flows One Way" on the last Gov't Mule record. We've known each other a long, long time, and Billy's a musician and drummer, and music was his first passion. And so he called me when they were filming Landman and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a song. If I send it to you, you want to finish it and maybe record it for the soundtrack, you know?" So it just kind of came about organically. I'm happy with the way it turned out. It was just me in the studio. It's very stripped down, acoustic and slide guitar and some like tiny bit of percussion. And I thought about making it more than that, but it just felt cool, and I decided to stay with it.
A beautiful song. It really fits in with the show.
Thanks.
Good show.
Hey, you know, go ahead, Kenny.
I was just going to talk about Stephen Colbert. How did that come about? You jumped in on the Late Show.
Yeah.
A little residency, a couple of nights? Or?
Yeah, just the one night.
I thought it was two. Okay, no, I'm sorry.
Well, it was going to be one night, and they moved it to the next night. But it came about because I'm friends with Louis Cato, the band director on that show. And he and I played together before. And we ran into each other at the Soho sessions, I guess a month or two ago. And we're just chatting, and he mentioned, "Hey, why don't you come down and sit in with the band, because, you know, the show's going away." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And then we started talking about him guesting with Gov't Mule at the Beacon for our New Year's shows. And we were doing this theme of 1971, and I made a big list of songs from 1971. And it included an Al Green song and two Marvin Gaye songs. And I needed somebody, a guest artist, to sing those songs. And I thought, well, Louis would be perfect. And so he came down and was fantastic on that. It just kind of came about like most things do, just organically, you know.
Speaking of that New Year's Eve show, I mean, you've done so many fantastic themes, but I'm always curious, now that we're talking, how do you land on these themes, number one? How much thought goes into it? And then, like, when it comes time to say, okay, we're going to do this, do you guys rehearse, or do you just say, here's the set list, and then everybody just comes to the sound check and that's it?
No, there's a lot of rehearsal that goes into it. It varies every year depending on how much rehearsal we need. Sometimes we hold up in a rehearsal space for a few days prior. Sometimes we just rehearse at the sound checks prior, depending on how much time we have. But in this case, I think we played like I don't know, so many songs from 1971. We started listening and learning months in advance, but a few days rehearsal went into it, and then we rehearsed with Yola, who sang 3 songs, and with Louis Cato, who sang 3 songs the day of the show. So they're long days.
Yeah. What were the two? There was a couple special guitars that you pulled out for this one. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, there were 3 actually. I played Dickie Best's Les Paul that he played at Fillmore East in the old days, which later belonged to my friend Dan Toller, who was in the Allman Brothers in the 79, 80, 81. That's a fantastic 59 Les Paul. One of Jerry Garcia's Travis Bean guitars that was from 1976 that he played like on Terrapin Station and stuff. I played that on a few songs, and the 1963 Telecaster that belonged to Mike Bloomfield that he played with Bob Dylan at Newport in 1965, played that on a few songs as well. All those guitars have a sound of their own. They're pretty amazing.
Wow, that's just some incredible stuff. It's like you're outdoing yourself. You know, it's funny in prepping for this. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I could give Warren some ideas for some themes, but if you
He nails
I
it.
don't know.
Come on, he had Corey Glover doing Aerosmith a couple of months ago. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know, but I'm open to any ideas because it gets harder and harder to think of something.
It's harder to time, Phil.
Yeah, because you know what's that?
Well, I mean, you could think about playing maybe some classic live albums, Machine Head, Frampton Comes Alive. I don't know,
Yeah.
All the World's a Stage. You take
That-
bits of each.
That's a great idea. You know, we've done shows like we did a Woodstock theme and we did a Watkins Glen theme, and one of the ones that's been on the list was maybe doing like the Atlanta Pop Festival or Isle of Wight, but we've never done a live album that I'm, to my knowledge. We've done studio albums. We did Led Zeppelin Houses of the Holy one time. We did Who's Next one time.
Signs of the Mule.
Yes, that's a great idea.
And, you know, Warren, considering Metal Mayhem ROC, our central theme is hard rock and heavy metal, how about an all-metal night? An all-metal show?
All good stuff. You know, we did also, just since we're talking about it, Halloween is the other day that we do. You know, sometimes we do a theme for New Year's Eve and a theme for Halloween. They're different but similar. And in Atlanta a few years ago, we did an all Black Sabbath show, and it was really fun.
I've heard excerpts of that. I heard
you've jammed with Roger Glover as well. I remember that one time, right? Didn't you guys do a When a Blind Man Cries?
Yeah, Roger and I played together a few times. I played with Deep Purple 2 or 3 times as well, which was amazing. You know, Roger and I go way back. He was one of the bass players on the Deep End sessions after Alan Woody died. And I love Roger. He's a really great human being and a fantastic bass player.
Warren, I'm sorry about Bob Weir, and I know you've spoken about this in the last couple of weeks. Did you have any plans for a tribute or anything coming up for him?
No, you know, I was hoping to get there for the thing they did in San Francisco, but it just wasn't possible. I'm sure I'll do some stuff on my solo tour that pays tribute to Bob. And, you know, he and I played together so many times, and it's a big loss. He touched a lot of people, and, you know, his songs are going to be heard 100 years from now. You know, he definitely he created some amazing music that's going to be around forever.
Warren, in listening to the tribute, it was amazing the other day, and they said something like Bob suggested that he envisioned the Grateful Dead to be around for 300 years. And there was confusion. There were some things that said, oh, they're going to hand the reins over to John Mayer. And like, listen, if there was an opportunity down the line for you to get up there front and center with somebody like John Mayer to do a tour, would you consider it again?
I don't know. I mean, it's not something that's been talked about. My schedule has been so nuts for so long, and I was telling somebody the other day in an interview when I toured with the Dead in 2009. Gov't Mule was promoting a new record at that time, and I was touring with the Allman Brothers. And my schedule was so crazy when I got the call from the Dead saying, can you do this upcoming tour? My first reaction was, I don't think so. I don't think I could squeeze it in. I don't think it's possible. And my wife said, I think you can make it work. She said, do you want to look back and say, I had this opportunity, but I said, no, I'm too busy. And so we made it work. It meant in some cases getting off of one bus and onto another. Like we did a show at the Gorge in Washington State that was the Allman Brothers and the Dead together. I played both shows. It was the end of the Allman Brothers tour and the beginning of the Dead tour. And I literally got off the Allman Brothers bus, got on the Dead bus, no day off, and just went from one to another. But it was a fantastic opportunity. I love all those guys and love that music. And that's a tough question to answer. Sharing the stage with any of those folks at any time is always an honor for me.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's going on in the Gov't Mule camp now? You've had some lineup changes, new drummer. How's Matt doing?
Matt's having issues with his back, and I talked to him a few days ago, and he hates not being out here. But as he explained it, he said, he's been playing drums for 60 years, and it's just taken its toll physically. I've never understood how drummers do it anyway. I play a little drums myself, but after 15 minutes, I'm wiped out. And Matt Apps was one of those people that would play 8 or 10 hours some days, and I never knew how he did it. But it's catching up with him, and his back is really giving him fits. Terrence Higgins has been filling in and doing a fantastic job. And Kevin Scott is our new bass player now for the last 3 years or so. And Kevin has just brought a whole new energy into the band. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Warren, you mentioned your wife before she's your manager, correct?
Yeah.
How do you find working with your wife as your manager? Do you find it easy? Do you find it difficult?
Yes. Yes, and to both.
Be very careful, Warren.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. When my wife, when we met in 1989, she was just starting to work for Island Records doing A&R, and she worked for Island for a few years, and then she left to start her own management company. In the beginning, we vowed to not work together, just to keep our things separate. And that's the way we thought it was going to stay. And then in 1995, Gov't Mule had made our first record and was doing a tour. And the manager for Gov't Mule at that time was my manager, who I had since before Gov't Mule formed. And Alan Woody and Matt Apps were not happy with him as a manager. And so they came to me one day on the bus and said, hey, we need to talk to you about something. And I said, okay. And they said, well, we want to change management. What do you think about Stephanie managing our band? And I said, well, if you're asking me if I think she'll do a great job, yeah, I think she will. But it also puts me in a position of not being able to fire my manager. And they were like, we understand, but if you're cool with it, that's what we would like to do. So I was like, yeah, all right. And so we've worked together ever since. But that's the way it came about. And it was really Alan Woody's idea. And he went to Matt, and Matt agreed. And so they came to me. But, you know, in a modern light, it makes a lot of sense because the music business is different these days. And it's really great to have someone you completely trust in your corner.
Absolutely. Well, Warren, we always like to end every segment by asking something outside the music. And I'm going to ask this question that I've asked a lot of others, but what's something that our listeners and fans, what's Warren like outside of music? Tell us something that you do without picking up a guitar and singing.
My son is 14 and his two passions are drums and hockey. And he loves playing hockey. And so I go to his hockey games. I take him to some of the games. You know, I was not a hockey fan 5 years ago, but now I am. And so we go to Rangers games together. I go to as many of his games as possible. And growing up in the South, that's not something that I ever thought that I would say that I become a big hockey fan, but that's the way it is.
Well, you and Kenny have something in common. You're both Rangers fans, but I, on the other hand, I'm an Islander fan, so we got a little rivalry.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't see that coming. I would have thought the Devils.
Oh, no, Islanders fan. Well, Warren, again, thanks for hanging with us today. And again, congratulations on the re-release of the album. It's been an honor to speak to you, and we hope to have you again down the line on the show. So, and to everybody else listening, make sure you stay plugged into Warren's doing next, because he's always got something going on.
Metal for Life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.